Hello and welcome to the Everyday Adventure podcast. My name is Nikki Bass and I'm a business psychologist, army veteran and everyday adventurer. I will be sharing my conversations with some truly incredible guests who are weaving adventure into their daily lives. And I really hope that these conversations inspire you to undertake your own everyday adventures too. So welcome back, everybody. This is the first podcast of 2026. So I'm really excited. I hope you had a really wonderful festive period, new year. I hope 2026 brings you everything that you're looking forward to. And as is, I think it's the 6th today. So Christmas tree's officially going away. Mine went down over the weekend because I'd had enough of it. But anyway, back to the point. Today, I'm really, really thrilled to welcome back my friend Ash Alexander Cooper OBE to the show. So if you are an Everyday Adventure Podcast OG listener, you might remember Ash from 2021, July 2021. He was on episode 10, season 3 of the show, when he had just completed a marathon in his hotel room. This was during COVID and in Sydney, and he'd been out there visiting his daughter. So if you're not familiar with Ash, that gives you a sense of probably the type of person he is. I think it's fair to say he is what we would call a multi-hyphenate. He's one of these people whose CV leaves you feeling like you just don't know what you've been doing with your life. But I'm going to try and share a little bit about him with you. So Ash is a former soldier, combat helicopter pilot, athlete, musician and artist, and is now a keynote speaker as well, who now works with businesses and leaders who are looking to build resilience and adapt in complex environments. And he's also just added author to the mix. And that's the reason I'm speaking to him today. So Ash has just written the most incredible book with Dr. Jessica Miller called Mindful Soldier. And in this book, he draws on his own experiences and the psychology behind them to share lessons and strategies that can be applied by anybody who's looking to build resilience and to overcome life's challenges. And for those of you who've listened to this podcast for a while, you know, resilience is a bit of a pet topic of mine. It's a topic that's really close to my heart because of the reasons that I feel that, you know, adventure can help to build resilience and the science behind that as well, but also in my day-to-day job as an occupational psychologist, which is very much working with people in this space. So for those reasons, I am so thrilled that Ash has agreed to join and chat to me about the book and everything it contains. So Ash, welcome to the show. It's so wonderful to have you here.
Thanks for having me back.
It is a pleasure. So I guess what I'd like to, I'm conscious that with everything that you do, you have a pretty busy life already. So I guess what I was wondering is what inspired you to write Mindful Soldier? Where did the idea come from?
Do you want the honest answer or the publicity answer? The honest answer is that I really didn't mean to. I didn't plan to be an author, so I would describe myself probably as either an accidental or reluctant author, honestly. I've had a few experiences that have been quite challenging over my lifetime that have helped build my resilience. And it was really because of friends and customers, colleagues and clients who said, you've really got to write some of this stuff down. So I was like, really? And I wasn't keen because I thought if it was telling lots of stories from my experiences in and of itself, that would feel quite self-indulgent for me and just didn't feel like a thing that I would be comfortable with. And then I met with Jess, who is an amazing neuropsychologist who spent her career specializing a lot in policing trauma, so frontline policing trauma. And she was introduced to me by a mutual friend who is a career police officer who had to retire with a medically retired after all of his trauma that he experienced. And it became clear with her expertise and my ramblings, it might be quite a good combination that if I could turn some of those experiences, most of which are as a result of having failed or struggled in something, if Jess could make sense of them in a neuroscience way, but accessibly for people from all walks of life who aren't scientists themselves, then that might be useful. And if it could help anybody, then I was willing to entertain the possibility of writing. But as you sort of identified, I'm quite busy bouncing around doing lots of different things. So the next challenge, once I kind of got over my own issues of not wanting to have to write anything down, was when I would do it. And I actually wrote it a few years ago, primarily the bulk of it really a few years ago, and it's obviously been tweaked over time. But it was between jobs. I was lucky enough to sort of get a a period between jobs, a few months where I could actually focus on this. So that's when I did it, and it's finally come to fruition. But it's been a journey in and of itself just to get it published, with getting approvals from the government to write various bits and bobs. And yeah, it's been a journey. The original publisher going bust twice. I mean, it's just the whole thing is quite fitting, I suppose, that a book on resilience has been such a struggle to get out there, but it is about to come out in January, so that's exciting.
Oh, I mean, it's so interesting. I find every author I speak to, part of the adventure is the writing of the book and how it gets brought into the world. And yeah, I put adventure probably in inverted
I didn't
comments.
see it as I certainly didn't see it as an adventure. I saw it as something that something to be feared. Honestly, I was terrified putting pen to paper. It's like, what if, like anything, I suppose, in life, that you, like the adventure stuff that you do with people are worried about failing. And all the way through, I'm thinking, is anyone even going to want to read this stuff? I've heard these stories, or I've been in the stories, as it were, so much, or they are my stories, and I've read them and reread them and redrafted so many times. I'm so bored of them that I sort of start to think that everyone else will be bored of them as well. But so far, those who have read it have been very kind, and everybody has found something different and connected differently with it. But everybody has found a connection. But for me, rather than being an adventure, I found it really self-induced high pressure to write, because I knew that I had this finite window where I had the ability to write between these jobs. And I, maybe stupidly, but I worked out that if I was going to get it done for a 60, 70, 80,000 word book, that I would necessarily need to write a certain number of words a day. And there were some days where I just looked at the screen and just went, nope, today is not the day. I have no words. And so then you think, right, well, tomorrow I've now got double the words I need to write. And I hated that. I really didn't enjoy that at all. That was my self-induced pressure.
Yeah, I'd just like to caveat this with literally none of the stories in this book are boring, Ash. So okay. if anyone's thinking of reading it, please do go out. There's no boring story in there.
I'm not reading publicity, am I?
It's all right. That's what I'm here for. Just to that point, there are so many stories which track the whole way through your lives. I mean, and some of them are deeply moving, and I guess someone who's known you for a long time, I wasn't aware of some of the stories, but not many of the stories in there. And they're very personal, which is what I suppose when I connect with a book, it's because I feel like I've got to connect with the person who's either writing it or the main character. Yeah. I'm not somebody who just likes a good story. It's like you've got to really get to know that person and feel part of their journey too.
Yeah.
And I would imagine it was probably quite a challenging process, thinking about, okay, what do I share? What do I not share? Where do the boundaries lie? How do I manage that? And I think that's something that all authors struggle with. I was just wondering, when you were thinking about what to share, were there any that particularly you thought that's something that needs to be out there, or I'm not so sure about this?
Yeah, a good question. I mean, it's absolutely a part of the thought process to wonder, how much do you share? Is there a risk of oversharing? But I was very keen. You referenced or said the word feel, that you want to feel like you're part of something. I wanted whatever I wrote to make people feel something, that they could connect with it in some way. Now, as you identified, I'm a former soldier, but I'm also a dad, and have gone through a number of things, as we all do in our lives. And I wanted to find a balanced number of themes, let's say, rather than stories, but themes that would resonate, even if it's just one per person in the book, but there's something that might connect with somebody, whether it's a relationship breakdown or fear of failure or imposter syndrome or loss or being part of a community or not being part of a community or being a soldier and being wounded or seeing friends killed and that sort of stuff. So there's a bit of an arc in the book of trying to knit together different themes, but I wanted it to be really authentic. And I do a lot of work at the moment, or have done for the last number of years, for charities, including that ultramarathon in hotel room for Royal British Veterans Enterprise, and other charities that I support. And in the course of meeting those veterans, particularly who have struggled, and recognizing that 90-something% go on to have completely fulfilling normal lives without any stress or struggle, but there are still those who do suffer. So those who I have met over the journey of working with various charities has really opened my eyes to one of the biggest challenges that many of them face, which is not feeling like they can be open and honest and authentic about the things that they are struggling with. So part of the reason for writing the book in the way that I have is to almost give people permission. Like, I have been very, I guess, vulnerable and open but authentic in telling some of the stories that are very personal, particularly in relation to my daughter. And I wanted that to be the case so that those who might be struggling and wondering whether they could and should be able to talk about some of the things they're struggling with, that it sort of, as I said, gives people permission to be able to do so and try and remove some of the stigma.
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? That thing of, you know, in a way it's protective to not want to share stuff that we're going through, and yet it's the thing that in the end, when we are able to be vulnerable like that, that creates a connection, I think. And maybe that's
I mean, the number of people that have, I mean, there's not that many people who've had the book. You've obviously had it, and there are a few you have who've very kindly written quotes and endorsed it. It's been really interesting for me and for Jess to see how the book has connected and what it has made people feel or think or want to kind of dig into in more detail. And it genuinely has been very different for every single person, because we're all so different as humans, right? And that's been fascinating in itself. And I'm hoping that once the book goes out into the wild more broadly, that there'll be even more people that find or see things in the storytelling or the challenges or the resilience journey that we talk through that I haven't even seen or that I haven't spotted because that wasn't my experience, but they've seen or connected in a way or relate to it slightly differently. One of the funny one, well, not funny, but there was an ex 4-star US Admiral, a friend of mine called Bill McRaven, and he said it made him cry. He got to the end, and there's a letter to my daughter at the back of the book, and he said he got to that, and then it brought him to tears. So you know, it seemingly has connected with very different people in different ways, which has certainly surprised me so far. So that's encouraging, I hope.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I can relate to that because I recently reread it, obviously being very well prepared for this interview, as I always am. And I got to the end of it and I was in tears with it too. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, I cry a lot.
I don't want to put people off though. I mean, hopefully it was good. I mean, I want people to walk away from it going, actually, that was moving, and I now will look at some of my own issues or my own challenges differently. And that's probably one of the fundamental things, is that some of my stories are fairly extreme, I suppose you could say. And if nothing else, if it helps put into perspective that even with those quite extreme stories across different types of themes, that there is still a way through. And if that is something that people take away, just realizing that there is a way where they may not have been able to see one before, then that's going to be good.
No, I know one of the things that you were really keen to emphasize as well was that whilst there are a number of military related stories within it, and just again, going back to me, because that's really important. But one of the things that I found really interesting and refreshing is I'm not somebody who tends to read military books, if I'm honest, which probably says something more about me than anything. But I think what comes through, therefore, is that personal aspect. It's the relational piece. And I connected it not from a background of this is what happens within the military, but actually, isn't it interesting, the psychological aspects of what you're going through, but also in terms of that connection. And I know you're keen to emphasize for people, you know, actually there is so much you can learn. These are stories that are illustrating a point. And I just wonder, I know Jess shares quite a few really helpful strategies and really practical strategies, which are drawn out of the stories you share. Are there any of those strategies that you feel, or maybe it's all of them, but any strategy you think actually that is something that I now recognize I've used time and again, and I go back to that now it's been articulated?
Yeah, I mean, so the way, just for those who obviously haven't seen the book yet, essentially each chapter is a different theme, whether it's childhood trauma, imposter syndrome, like we said, or fear of failure, etc. And then at the end of my writing, then Jess at the end of each chapter then sort of unpicks what is going on in the brain. So if I talk about something particularly traumatic, like having a colleague killed in action, or struggling with parenting or relationship breakdown, she then explains in layman's terms what's going on in the brain and why it's hard, in a really accessible way, to say this is why you struggle in the moment to make sense of this, because your brain is processing these kinds of experiences in this way. And so hopefully at the end of each chapter, once a theme has been packaged, that people go, oh, okay, I now do have techniques or practical exercises that might help me. And I can't say that I've used all of them in all of my life, but to your point, I have recognized that, luckily for me, I guess, some of them have been things that I've done, but without knowing, just pausing and just, we've all done it where you kind of go, you just take a breath and you kind of like, now what? And those things are genuinely techniques that one can employ or apply in certain scenarios, just to kind of ground you and just give yourself a moment just to kind of recalibrate. But I'm not that I feel like I'm a fraud, but I have said that a little bit to myself, I guess, that I do feel fraudulent in some ways, in that I know so many others struggle more than I have, for all sorts of reasons. And I don't want to claim that I am worse off than anyone else, because I recognize how lucky and fortunate I am that despite all of the trauma and experience that I've had to learn or build over my life, I'm not as impacted as perhaps others might be, or I should be. And therefore I'm very conscious all the way through that I am speaking from my perspective, but I know that others will have had, in some cases, much more traumatic or unpleasant journeys than I have. But if I can, again, just frame it for people, then it may help.
Yeah, I think one of the things that really struck me, and I guess I'm slightly alive to it because it's something that I'm often picking up, when I'm working with people around resilience, around resilience development. I think one of the most underrated aspects of resilience is the fact that we are supported by others, that we go back to having people around us, and it tends to be seen as this very individual sort of pursuit, or you're either lucky and you're very resilient, or you're too bad, sorry, you're not very resilient.
Yeah.
It's seen as a definite rather than a actually we all struggle at different times in our lives with different things, and often the thing that makes a difference is the support around us. I know that's something that you share quite a lot of in the book, and I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that and how that's helped you as well.
Yeah, I mean, as humans, we are hardwired to be part of a tribe, right? And I think that's where not just veterans, but people struggle. If you lose a job, change jobs, you lose your relationship, you no longer have that immediate community around you, or that sort of network of people. And that's where people struggle, is trying to find their new tribe or trying to reconnect with a tribe. And I think that's just a natural part of life that we should all just recognize and accept. That's how we are. Because I think that can then help frame how we find our new place or find peace and comfort, etc. And for me, my family life was pretty traumatic growing up. So for me, friends were everything. And I've always been that person who will make an effort to stay in touch with friends, even if some are busier or just aren't as good at staying in touch, because I value that so much from my early years, particularly, and in my sporting career, as it were. Those teammates that you were doing stuff day in, day out, and putting your body on the line in some cases to do things together, that teamwork and camaraderie and sort of innate support you get from being part of a group, whether it's sporting or music or whatever, band, doesn't really matter, or a work group. But the thing that really jumped out at me in some of my, I wouldn't say darkest moments, but the hardest periods of my life, was that it wasn't always the people that I expected to reach out and just not take no for an answer, or not take a text that had not been responded to multiple times as okay, well, I won't bother. It was often people who I didn't know as well who were the ones who made the most difference. And that was really surprising and enlightening for me. And I've tried, therefore, to pay that forward, and now have a bunch of friends who've gone through some, really challenging things in their lives. They're losing children, or, other stuff that just you would never wish on anybody. Not people that I was particularly close to, but just reaching out to them and saying, I understand that this will be a really tough period for you, and recognizing that those closest to you often are the ones who do disengage or step back because they're terrified of saying the wrong thing and don't know what to say, and don't want to say something that sounds trite or unhelpful. But just the process of saying something can make the world a difference. So I try, I'm not always good at it, but I do try whenever I can recognize in somebody they might be struggling, just to not take no for an answer, and just make sure that I'm here, and they can scream, shout, cry, or whatever they want to do, because we all need each other. That's just our life's journey, is that we're, as I said, part of a tribe, and we need people around us. So do as you would seek others to do to you if you were in that situation.
No, it's really interesting, isn't it? That actually different people can also show up for us at different times, depending on where they are and their perspective too, and how resilient they're also feeling, and also the meaning attached to it as well. So the book comes out on
22nd of January.
22nd of January.
In the UK, and 27th of January worldwide.
Amazing. And I mean, what are your hopes for the book? What would you like in your wildest dreams? Where would you like to see this going? What sort of conversations, I guess, would you like to spark with it?
Well, I mean, obviously, I'm human, so I would love to see lots of nice reviews where people have said that it helped them in some way. But you can't please all the people all the time. So I hope, have to accept up front that's going to be a resilience journey probably in and of itself. If people say this is the worst book I've ever read and all it's done is raise my computer up 2 inches, that's all it's good for. Really twofold is I want to help people directly by reading the book and finding something useful in it that has connected and made them feel something or think differently about their challenges and how they will approach their current or future challenges as they build resilience. But also indirectly that, again, part of this, my own internal battle of whether I should even bother writing a word is that this book isn't about me or for me. Yes, the stories and themes are from my life, but it isn't genuinely, it's not about me or for me. These are just vehicles to be able to discuss and explain and unpack different types of trauma and resilience. So I'm giving 100% of all profits that I make, assuming there will be some, to veterans charities. That was the only way that I could reconcile for me that this was something that I was willing to do and to promote, heavily or aggressively, as it were. So I'd love to support people directly from reading the book and getting something really useful from it and enjoying it, even if they cry at the end, sorry. But also raising as much money as I can that those who are doing the greatest work to help those most in need get as much money as I can give them by dint of the sales that we make and the profit we make from those sales.
Amazing. I love the fact that even in the sort of the journey of putting your book out into the world, you're sort of practicing building resilience as well. I think, because again, another key aspect.
It's terrifying. It's terrifying.
Well, I just thinking, so many people go, yeah, I'd love to do something, but I'm terrified. I'm scared. I don't know, it just feels too much and can't and just don't get started, and I'm certainly not one to judge because I absolutely relate to that place. And I just think the fact that you've managed to find a purpose and how important purpose is to resilience as well. Sometimes a bit of a double-edged sword because it can take us too far. But, actually that purpose, okay, this is raising money. Not only am I sharing, hopefully some really helpful strategies and ways to think about resilience, but also this is making money for charities that I really care about.
Yeah.
Can help get over that sort of, I
honestly, I felt sick when I got I got 300 books before Christmas to sign. I've got another 400 to sign next week with the publisher. But when I got all the boxes before Christmas, I felt physically sick opening them just to hold the book and I was excited, obviously, but also had that sort of slightly nauseating feeling. Like, oh my God, this is real now. There's no going back.
I mean, like for anyone who's ever done a LinkedIn post, can I just say, and put themselves on that, like that sick feeling. I'm just getting that in like multiple versions right now. Every time I press it, I'm just like, oh God, I can't bear to look at myself. And now it's like, right, here I am.
To anything. I won't listen back to this, for example. I can't bear the sound of it. You sound great, by the way, but I can't. Yeah.
I'm very used to the sound of my own voice now, ironically, having done this for 5 years. Yeah. So it's like, when I started, I was like, I just can't listen. And now I'm like, it's just somebody else in a blur in the background. But it's so interesting, I think, when we're foregrounding ourselves and how difficult that can be if that's something that, as individuals we find challenging, but yeah, finding a way of solution.
You mentioned social media. I mean, I'm not a natural social media person. I just don't have not the inclination. It's not a thing that I spend time or have really experience in doing. And it's just hit and miss. So I feel like it takes me far longer than a professional would take, but I obviously am not paying for a professional to do it. And because I'm not a professional, I have no idea whether one post to the next is going to actually make a difference. And you think, I'm guessing here, and the things that you think might be the most engaging posts aren't. It's random ones that come up that you get far more clicks or follow throughs to book purchases or whatever. And I just don't know how that algorithm works, but it's not a natural place to be. So yeah, being in the foreground, to use your term, is something that's not natural. But I guess I have to get used to it.
Yeah, I mean, I can't share any insights. That's a completely different podcast. You'll need to go on for some help with that. But I do think it connects to something about how you've written the book, which is that in the end, it is the authenticity that connects. That is what people come back to. And I think particularly nowadays, and I would imagine ever increasingly going forward with AI, and that in the end anyone can write something deeply polished and perfect with the help and assistance of what needs to happen, but to be able to actually, as you said at the beginning, step up and be vulnerable and go, this is who I am, these are the stories, and this is what I've learned, and to put that out there, I think takes a different kind of courage. So on that note, I mean, usually I ask people, because I probably asked you this before, to be fair, so you don't need to, you probably can't remember your answer from 4 years ago.
I didn't know, 2021. That was a surprise. That was a good reminder.
If somebody's listening to this and they think, actually, I'm looking at 2026 ahead and I'm thinking I would really like to try and develop my resilience a bit further. I would like to try and build. I want to try and use some of the challenges that I'm facing and maybe not experience them to the depths that maybe I've experienced things in the past, or I want to think about how I can maybe start to reframe some of the things that are happening to me. I mean, from your experience of writing this book, from sharing your stories, from working with Jess, I mean, is there sort of one piece of advice that you would offer?
Over and above going and buying the book straight away, the only other bit of advice I would say is, and I talk about a lot of this when I work with companies and executives, is that we are all living, and I can't remember if we talked about this last time or not, so apologies if we did, for the OGs, but we live in a complex world now, and complexity by definition is unpredictable. And I think the biggest thing that I've learned, not just in my professional career, but my personal life, is that in a complex environment where you don't have all the answers and you can't predict all the outcomes because you don't own all the levers, is getting comfortable in your own mind, in your own body, that at least 50% of what's coming is unwritten. Now, the challenge for most of us, along with needing to be in a tribe and tell stories and everything else, is that where we can't see finite things or we can't predict what's going to happen to us as humans, we default generally to see risk and threat. But actually, if you can reframe it and say complexity, 50% at least is unwritten and therefore I can't plan it, that's opportunity, that's freedom. And sort of reframe how those things that are buzzing around that may make life really complicated or rather complex is an opportunity to write that bit that has yet to be written. And for me, that's been probably the most freeing thing in my life, is to, like we used to do in the military, you'd have your plan, which would always fail the moment you cross the start line because the enemy gets a vote. But having thought in advance about what would happen if this were to happen, the sort of actions on, as we used to call it, right? Having at least a few ideas about if this were to happen, this is how I might approach it. So nothing is completely a surprise, but accepting that much of what is going to be happening is a complete surprise because we can't predict. So a very long-winded way of saying, get comfortable with complexity and look for the opportunities that exist in that complexity, in that gray space, rather than trying to seek certainty and finite answers to questions that none of us have answers to.
Yeah, no, it's so interesting. So in an uncharacteristic act of efficiency prior to this podcast, I did actually put some little tabs in your book of things that I was wanting to talk about. Yes, I've never done this before. It's never going to happen again. I'm going to just show you. Look at this. I got 2 chapters in and then I thought, no, it's all right. I'll just wing it. I shouldn't be so honest, should I? But one of the tabs, those little sticky notes that I put in there was, I think right near the beginning, you talk about how much, in a way, the failures of the human condition is to acknowledge how much of what happens in our life is down to chance. And that therefore we seek to try and control everything around us. We seek to try and, gain some certainty because that makes us feel safe. That makes us feel protected.
Yeah.
But in the end, actually, what it does is the opposite, because then when that chance event happens or when things don't go as planned, we're untethered, we're unraveled because of it. So I just think it's so interesting that that's the aspect that you pick up on. And I think so much of the work around resilience is can you sit in that space of deep and difficult uncertainty and not knowing and still believe this is going to be okay? Somehow I will find a way through this. Somehow we will find a way through it. Yeah. So I absolutely love that you shared that as a strategy, because I think so much more could be. It's always in a way gives us permission to be able to go, do you know, maybe it's not that I'm not resilient. Maybe it's that I'm fighting to be in control, where actually I maybe I do.
And and so much of what we do is completely out of control. I mean, the first time I was shot, I wasn't in control of anything. And that was really scary. That was probably the first biggest scary thing in my adult life that had happened. But to your point about permission, not random, but another experience later on when the army had classically lost a letter inviting me to go to the World Championships to do a duathlon thing in the early 2000s. And therefore I hadn't trained because I'd assumed that I hadn't been selected, and I only had a month to get fit to go to a World Championships, which I'd never been fit before, which was a bit of a shock, obviously. And I'm thinking, oh my God, how am I going to get fit in 1 month, which was a tall order. And I eventually got to the start line, having been out drinking the night before because it was the graduation from the pilot's course with all my buddies that I'd been flying with for 18 months. And I didn't want to miss that. I'd had about 2 hours sleep because I had to get the ferry to Calais to do the race in Calais. Couldn't find anywhere to have breakfast, so I had a stale croissant. And I stood on the start line and I thought I couldn't control any of that because I didn't lose the letter. I didn't shut all the shops that might sell, proper breakfast. All these things that I could not control, but I now found myself on the start line wearing a Great Britain jersey and my first World Championships in a brand new sport that I'd not done before. And I was the calmest I've ever been in my life. I gave myself permission to kind of go, what could possibly go wrong? I've got here. That's kind of it now. Let's just try and enjoy it. And I had the race of my life. I mean, I didn't, podium or anything. I was only 20th, but that was a really interesting psychological sort of experiment, I suppose, for me, that had I had the perfect preparation and spent 4 months training or 6 months training with coaching and all the stuff, the pressure I would have put on myself on that start line would have probably meant that I'd done far worse. Now, I'm not saying, and I do say this in the book, I'm not saying or advocating for not training and just winging it and drinking before a big race and, having a croissant as your breakfast, for a 2-hour thing. But just in the psychological sense, just giving myself permission to just get in the zone in a way that was not something I'd ever experienced before was really, really interesting for me.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love that story. I'd just like to say I did exactly the same with the 10K in Bournemouth a few weeks ago. I didn't have the same result, to be honest, but I know. Oh, absolutely. In my own head, I did, that's for sure. I was so excited to get round and not, collapse in a heap. But I do think there's something about, like you said, you were prepared in a sense. You've got a background that enabled you probably to show up. But at the same time, there was enough space in there that just to wing it. And I think everybody is different in the sense of what they feel they can manage and what they can't manage and how much preparation they need. But I think working on finding that balance for yourself, how much do I need to prepare? How much can I cope with and tolerate that uncertainty of not being quite sure whether I'm going to make it round on the day, whatever that is. How much trust do I have in my own resources that if this is the situation that happens, that it will be okay, that I'll be able to manage. And I think exploring those things for ourselves, which we don't often do, can be really interesting, really revealing. But I love my story.
I still do it now. And I just as you were talking, I just reminded myself that although that first story of the World Championships was, I think, 2000, now I still struggle, even though I'm now fatter, less fit, wounded and everything else, disabled, blah, blah, blah. I still put the same pressure on myself, even if I'm doing a charity marathon or a half marathon or something. And like I said, I'm only thinking about it as you're talking. I've given myself permission to not be as fast as I would love to be in my head or would have been 20 years ago. And so now when I generally do charity marathons, rather than running with just the charity vest on, I dress up in some stupid costume. And I often will still do as fast a run as if I hadn't been wearing the costume, but I've given myself permission going, well, I'm wearing a wrestler's outfit. I've got all this stuff that I'm carrying. Of course, I'm not going to be fast. But weirdly, that sort of gives me the ability to not have to feel so awful that I'm no longer an athlete. So I've sort of, my permission formula probably needs a bit of work actually, but you just reminded me of that. So I'm still bad at it, but I'm trying.
I think most people are, if I'm honest. I think it's a constant work in progress. But I think that thing of just even being conscious of, okay, where is this pressure coming from? And, like you said, can I run around dressed as a T-Rex and
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
and that's the point in the end.
yeah, yeah.
And and how freeing that can be as well. Ash, I'm going to have to draw it to a close. I could probably keep
Sure.
chatting like this for hours, but if people want to buy the book, please go and buy the book. It is genuinely brilliant. But if they want to buy a copy of the book, if they want to find out about more about you, about your work, where can they go?
Well, you can Google, or other search engines are available. Mindful Soldier. Yeah, Mindful Soldier there. It's got a mountain, a hand-drawn mountain. It's available in all good bookshops, I think is what you're supposed to say. But you can find it on Amazon and in the UK, Waterstones, W.H. Smith, and all the other bookshops like that, I hope. You can Google me. I think you can find me now on ashalexcooper.com, has some stuff on there. But yeah, basically just go and find Mindful Soldier, and other things I'm sure will pop up as a result of that.
Yeah, no
but
worries.
I'd love people to buy it and then let me know. I'd love the feedback to know what connected for you. That for me is going to be the next phase of my resilience journey, is understanding why and how what we did has become useful or not for people. So please do get in touch if there's anything you'd like to share or if you'd like to explore more.
Brilliant. Well, I'll make sure I'll pop all those links in the show notes as well, so people can go straight away and don't have to spend hours on Google. It comes up on the first page, you're fine, but it'll make it a little bit easier. Ash, it's been absolutely amazing. I've loved talking to you about the book. It's been great to catch up as always. And I really do wish you every bit of success with the book going forward as well.
Thanks for doing what you do as well. I love your podcast, and just the way that you lift other people up is really just brilliant.
Oh, thank you. I might go and cry again. On that note, I'm going to end it. Thanks so much again. Take care.
All right.
Bye. So once again, an enormous thank you to Ash for coming in and kicking off the new year in style for us. I really do encourage you to go and get a copy of his book, Mindful Soldier, if you have been interested in any of the topics we've talked about today, any of the themes that have arisen. The one thing that I'd like to pick up just to finish on today is where we left the conversation, really, talking about permission. I'm not usually one for sort of setting big New Year's resolutions or intentions or words of the year or anything like that. Honestly, it's enough just to scramble my brain together to get started at the beginning of January. But I think if it was to choose a word for this year, I think permission would probably sit very high up there. And it's because it's something that I know that I struggle with. And I know that it's something that many of my friends and my clients and lots of people I have conversations with all the time find hard. It's this idea that we have this, whether it's a devil on your shoulder or whether it is that voice in your head that is constantly telling you should be more or less, or should be achieving more things, or should be giving more, doing more, whatever it is that voice is constantly reprimanding you for. And I think for me, giving myself permission just to tell it to shut up and leave me alone on occasion, even if that doesn't necessarily work, is really, really important. Because if I gave that voice the airtime that it thinks it deserves, I would spend a lot of my time feeling pretty terrible about myself, I think. And when we think about resilience and how to build it, how to develop it, how to protect it, because I think a lot of resilience is really protecting our own mental energy, our own space, our own approach to being in the world and to seeing that as valid. There will always be temptation to compare to others or to feel that we should be something else or behaving in a certain way. And I think there is something incredibly freeing about going, actually, this is who I am. That doesn't mean that there aren't some rough edges that I don't seek to refine or mediate or do better at times, but that my way of being in the world is fundamentally okay. And that it's okay to validate that as well as to seek to self-improve. So if you're out there and sort of feeling like, oh, start of the new year and I should be resolving to do all of these new things, take on big adventures, whatever they may be, please do go for them if that's what drives you and what you want to do, and you're feeling suitably motivated or excited or energized, and you can see a way to do it. But if that's not where you are, that is perfectly valid. And you have permission just to step back from that too and go, let's see how the year unfolds. Let's see where it takes. And sometimes I might be out there and wanting to be, out there in the world. And there might be other times where I need to step back. And equally, both of those are absolutely fine. Anyway, I'd love to know what you think, as always. So please do reach out, get in touch. You can find me on Instagram at Everyday Adventure Pod or Resilience at Work. You can find me on LinkedIn, Nikki Bass. You can find me via my website, resiliencework.co.uk. Or equally, you can go to our podcast home, Substack, and I publish this podcast there every time it comes out, and there's an opportunity to comment, to get in touch. So absolutely, please do reach out to me there. I've got one other point to say, which is an enormous thank you to everybody who's downloaded and listened to Brian and Keely's podcast from the end of 2025, December 2025. I think it was published right at the end of November, in fact. It was the story of Brian's journey with young onset dementia and Keely, his wife, his partner, supporting him. The response to that episode has been it's blown my mind. It's been phenomenal. I've had so many lovely comments. It has broken all Everyday Adventure podcast records in terms of its downloads, which is wonderful because as many people get to hear their story and their message as possible. So if you are one of those people who's listened, thank you so much. And I hope you've enjoyed this episode too. Please do keep listening. I've got the whole rest of season 8 to share with you, which will be out before the middle of this year. So keep listening, share with your friends if you've enjoyed it. And otherwise, I'll be back again very soon with some more incredible guests for you. Have a wonderful January. Take care. Bye.